Hello, I'm David DeGrotenhuis, head of school at Crown Point Christian School, and I'd like to welcome you to the Association Town Hall budget presentation. Unfortunately, the audio file from the actual town hall meeting was corrupted when it was transferred to our Google Drive, and therefore I am re-recording the presentation. I will also add the question that was asked at the town hall meeting and respond to that question at the end of this video. Thank you for joining us. I hope you find this information informative. In addition to this, you will be receiving, or you already have received, the packet of information for the association meeting that's taking place on Wednesday, April 19 at 7 p.m. in the Crown Point Christian School Gymnasium. I would encourage you to come out and learn more about the school, to vote on the budget, as well as vote for new officers to the board. So let's get right into the presentation. First of all, I'm just going to give you a broad overview, and then we will narrow in on some of these topics. The proposed budget that's being presented this year is actually accounting for income that exceeds expenses by 0.25%. The proposed budget comes with a proposal to increase tuition 5%, which would actually be 1% greater than what the strategic roadmap proposed. And I will explain to you why we went an additional percent in one of the upcoming slides. All the items in the roadmap have been built into the proposed budget. So if you were a part of the town hall meetings, you saw the proposed costs. Those things have all been built in. In addition, I think it's important that we share with you that this budget reduces multi-child discounts from $400 for the fourth child and $800 for the fifth child to $300 and $600. You should know that there is a goal to eliminate multi-child discounts in order to focus on needs-based assistance moving forward. So you will see that go down for the next few years until it's at zero. Our budget priorities, there are 4 of them. I'm going to begin with teacher compensation, and then I'm going to talk about one of our roadmap items, which is accounting for some of our depreciation costs. The third one is some additional one-time costs that we will be incurring next year as we rebrand the school. And then finally, I want to give you an update. One of the costs incurred in this budget is the addition of a development, or the start of a development office, and I'll talk about that when that slide pops up. So I'd like to begin with teacher compensation. So if you remember last year's town hall presentation in the budget, we talked extensively about the gap between what Crown Point Christian salaries are at compared to that of area public and similar Christian schools. Over the course of the past 6 months, the board has targeted a desire that Crown Point Christian School salaries in the next 5 years be at least 90% of our local education agency, which would be Hanover Community Schools. You can see on this graph that our base salaries last year were 81%, so 81 cents on the dollar. Teachers at Crown Point Christian School were working for their comparable Hanover teacher who was a new teacher. And you can see that the longer you stayed at Crown Point Christian, the further away from base salary from what Hanover salaries were for employees with similar years of experience. You can see last year we made a pretty big jump in both areas. Our base salary this year is 85%, and our high salary is 86% of what Crown Point, of what Hanover School District is. And the proposed budget is proposing a 5% tuition increase as opposed to the 4%. And the reason for that is if we had gone with the 4% increase, our salaries for teachers would have actually been flat or slightly declined compared to Hanover's salaries. So we went from 4%, which is what the map originally, the roadmap originally proposed, and we went to 5%, and that additional percent went to teacher salaries, so that we are making progress towards, Lord willing, in the next 4 years, to get to 90% of what our local public school pays their staff. So you can see we made progress instead of regressing because of that additional percent. Before I move on to the next slide, I do want to point out that when we do this, we gather information from master contracts from our local public schools. Hanover is in the midst of a 2-year renegotiating their master contracts. So we will not have their master contracts for the 23, 24, 24, 25 school year until probably next September or October. So what that means is we had to predict what their salary would be in 23, 24. And what I can share with you is we use past data to indicate what that potential increase could be. We feel we were very conservative in that increase that Hanover is going to provide. So we did have to estimate what we believe their salary increase would be. And we believe that that's going to be around 5%. So in order to keep up, with our salaries, we increased our salaries, which required an additional 1% increase in tuition. One of the things that is done often by Christian schools in order to keep the cost of education down is not properly budgeting for depreciation expenses, particularly building and grounds type things, as well as computer software, just all of the things that eventually you're going to need to replace. The board has set out to annually increase depreciation expenses built into the budget. We currently have, last year we had 1.6% of our total budget was for depreciation expense. Our goal in the next 5 years is to get that to 5.5% of our total budget. So roughly $50,000 is going to, additional dollars are going to be put into accounting for depreciation expenses at Crown Point Christian School. That increases our depreciation expenses by about 56%. 20,000 of that is going to go to replace technology, and 30,000 additional dollars are going into depreciation expenses for building and grounds. In addition to taking those steps, the administration created a 10-year technology replacement cycle that accounts for essentially all of our technology. So you won't see spikes on years that we have to replace a large number of computers. Rather, you will see a consistent amount taken out of the general operating budget annually in order to account for all of those hardware and software purchases. The next thing I want to talk to you about is our development office. Crown Point Christian School has been blessed to have Patty Jabay oversee the Elevate campaign the last 3 years. And the Elevate campaign will be wrapping up on July 31st. And once that development campaign wraps up, we are going to be hiring a development assistant, and I will be working with that development assistant to do our donor development work here at Crown Point Christian School. What that required in the development office is some additional funds to be used to hire a development assistant. So you probably saw a communication about a month ago where we announced that Amanda Porter is going to be our development assistant. We're excited for her to step into that position this summer, as she provides assistance to Patty Jabay to finish up the Elevate campaign. And as we launch into our next steps here at Crown Point Christian School to develop a ongoing office that focuses on donor development. In addition to those three things, we did add some additional one-time costs. Most of those one-time costs are related to the rebrand at Crown Point Christian School. It's anticipated that these one-time costs would provide updates to our gym floor, to signage around the campus, as well as provide an update to the Crown Point Christian School website. So I want to share with you a few ratios that the board, when they pass a budget, when we talk about the budget, these are ratios that we look at and we monitor these. Our desire is to be progressing towards best practice. So there's three ratios we monitor: the tuition to expense ratio, the direct income would be anything that you know you're going to get. So donations are not something that would be considered direct income, but tuition would be direct income. Payments that we would receive for from the state for our student services would be considered direct income. Anything that we can say this is where this money is coming from, we know we're getting that, is considered direct income, to, of course, the total expenses that we have. And then finally, our income to expense ratio, which we're required constitutionally to have at least a balanced budget, but the board is beginning the process of planning for some additional contingency dollars in case we would see a decline in enrollment, but also in case some unexpected expenses would come up that we just didn't know about when we budgeted. So this year's budget is going to have 100.25%. We're planning for 100.25% income over our expenses. So here's a graph that shows last year's budget to this year's budget. So a tuition to expense ratio, last year our budget was right at just over 89%. You can see we're making a pretty good increase, almost a 2% increase in our tuition to expense ratio. So every 91 cents of every dollar spent at Crown Point Christian School comes from tuition income. The remaining 9% comes from other sources, including some philanthropy. The second ratio we really keep a close eye on, it's an important ratio. It's the direct income to expense ratio. And a healthy school is at least 91% of their total costs are covered by direct income. And you can see that Crown Point Christian School, we went from 92.4%, a little over 2% increase this year. We're almost at 94.5 or over 94.5% direct income to expense ratio. That's a really healthy place for a school to be. Our desire is that over the next 5 years, we're progressing to 97.5% of our expenses being covered by direct income. The final ratio is the ratio of our total income to expenses. Obviously, you want that to be at least 100%. Our desire over the next 5 years is to get that to 101%. You can see this year we're at 100.3%, or actually it's 100.25%. Our goal in the next 10 years is that we're budgeting annually for 102% of our total expenses. All right, let me give you just a quick overview of the budget itself. Included in the packet that was emailed on Wednesday, the 5th of April, is a budget summary that has more detail than what I'm about to show you. But I do believe it's valuable for you to see, again, ways in which the board monitors and oversees and reviews the budget just in general. So there's three primary categories that when we think of in terms of the school budget that we consider. The first one is compensation. The second one is fixed costs. Those are costs, things that you really have very little control over, like the cost of heat, water, electricity, etc. And then finally, mission delivery. These are the things that you need to have in order to operate a school. In order for us to deliver on our mission, these are the types of things that you should have. There's an organization, actually there's more than one organization, but Christian School Management and Independent School Management are two organizations that break down school costs in terms of these three categories. In addition to breaking down the costs, they provide you like a health indicator of what a healthy school would look like. So for example, compensation should be about 70 to 80% of a school's budget. Fixed costs should be somewhere between 15 and 20, and mission delivery should be somewhere between 5 and 10% of a school's budget. When you get outside of those ratios, there's you need to take steps to move things around to get within those ratios. So if you spend more out of one bucket, you have to spend less out of another. You don't have control over fixed costs. The only thing you really have control over is compensation and mission delivery. And it's really important that as we monitor compensation, that we offer competitive packages so that we can retain and recruit high quality teachers. In addition, we want to offer a high quality education at Crown Point Christian School. So it's important that we're investing properly in our mission as we look at our mission delivery piece of our budget. So you can see this is last year's expense. I'll go backward and forward so that you can kind of see the difference between the two. But this school year's budget, we had about 11% fixed costs, about 8% mission delivery, and about 82% of our total budget was compensation. You can see that 70 to 80% is what your compensation would be. You can see that last year we were a little bit above that metric. Our mission delivery, we were probably on the higher end on that, and our fixed costs, we were a bit low. I'm going to show you the next slide, and then I'll go back and forth into them. But you can see that as we look at this year's budget, we're adding a fourth field. I'll explain that in just a moment. But you can see that compensation, our budget has about 77% of our total budget is for teacher compensation. About 15% is fixed cost. And then you can see that little 2%, the compensation to fixed cost. So we really have closer to 17, just over 16, or just under 17% of our total budget is fixed cost. And the reason you're seeing a move from what used to be compensation to fixed cost is that this school year, instead of hiring our own evening janitorial service, we've sublet it. We've hired that out to a company. So what used to be compensation we were paying for a night janitorial staff is now a contract that's a fixed cost that we pay to a company to do the school cleaning. And you can see our mission delivery is at 6.1%. So one of the big changes you're going to see, and again, I'm going to go back to last year, you can see our fixed costs were at 10.7%, and this year they're just under 17%. And you may be wondering, why are fixed costs going up at a much more rapid rate than everything else? Well, the primary reason is, number one, we're moving some of our employees to hiring a company to do our cleaning. And secondly, if you remember, we're investing more into our depreciation expenses. So that going from last year 10.7% to this year just under 17% represents $50,000 additional dollars being budgeted for depreciation. So that's where those numbers come from. The next thing I'd like to talk with you about, and in the environment that we're in, it's just important that we recognize this. Operations reserves, those are your general operating budget. How much do you have in reserves on a month-to-month basis? The metric ratio the board is targeting is 30%, which is really high compared to what it would be considered best practice. That 30% would be an average over any 5-year period. Sometimes, of course, it's up, sometimes it's down. Essentially, you divide your reserves by what your total expenses are for the year, and that's where you're going to get that ratio. So the board has set a pretty lofty goal of building our cash reserves up to 30% over the next several years. So as we build budgets, we're looking for ways to increase operational cash reserves. So here is a sample of what we're currently at, and you'll notice that our cash reserves become less and less as we approach 2 months out of the year. The 1 month is in the end of February, and then you see our operational cash reserves get very low at the end of September as well. The reason you see that is our voucher payments from the state come in at 2 times during the school year. We get one payment in in March, usually mid to late March, and we get a second payment in October. So you can see that our operational cash reserves vary widely. On the far right-hand side of this graph, you can see that our operational cash reserve averages about 11%. Organizations like Christian School Management or Independent School Management recommend that schools have 15%, so it's something we know we need to be growing. And the board has set a pretty lofty goal of progressing towards 30% operational cash reserves. So the reason we're doing that is that when you're in a voucher environment, your operation reserves need to be set at different levels. And the reason that is the volatility you're going to see as your cash reserves are typically really high in March, and as they decline until October, and then they raise quite a bit in October again, and then decline again until March. So CPCS board their goal is to raise operational cash reserves and progress towards 30% of our school's expenses being available in operational cash reserves. This is something we monitor at each board meeting each month, just to make sure that we have the cash reserves we need to pay all of our bills. All right, this is the part you're probably most interested in. I'm just going to highlight a few things here. I'm going to show you the income side of things, the expense side of things, and then we're going to talk about tuition levels. So you can see that we are anticipating increased enrollment. So last year's budget was for 855 students. The proposed budget is anticipating 902 students. We believe that that is a really safe number. You can see that our tuition, we're going to see an increase in our tuition income from 6.3 million to just over 7 million. One of the things you haven't seen in the past that is showing up on this statement is the amount of grants and financial aid, as well as the tuition discounts that we offer. We offer a 10% discount to full-time staff at Crown Point Christian School, we also distribute tuition assistance. We're anticipating we're going to distribute about $66,000 in tuition assistance. You'll also notice a couple of additional income lines. The tuition assistance donation of $141,000. These are families that have chosen to opt out of the Second Life payments. We receive about just over $140,000 annually from parents who choose to opt out. So that does become income for us, and then we also expense that out below. Registration and application fees obviously are going up because of the increase in students. We have seen an increase in student service fees. These are funds that we receive from the state for servicing students who have plans, who have needs beyond the average student. Our philanthropy resources, you can see, we've actually pulled some of those numbers out. So the philanthropy is set this year as $261,521. You can see that we're pulling some of that's coming from tuition assistance as well. And then of course our booster revenue, we're projecting it staying the same as it did last year. So our total income this past year was right at 6.8 million. This year it's going to be at 7. We're proposing a budget that would have $7.6 million in income. The expense side of things, you can remember last year we bought a month of teacher contracts so that we could have August 1st start dates. We're not having to do that this coming year. So our personnel expenses are going from a little over 5.6 million to just under 6 million. Curriculum costs are just standard increases. Our technology, you remember we put in an additional $20,000 into our technology, as well as some additional subscriptions going up. Admin and support number has increased, as well as our building and grounds. The building and grounds, the primary increase of building and grounds is going to be the contract that we have for our third-party janitorial staff that comes in the evening. Um, and every other charge is pretty standard from year to year. And then finally, our tuition assistance reserves. Those are tuition assistance dollars that go into our tuition assistance fund to provide finances for those who have needs-based tuition assistance. You'll notice the admin and support line is going from 144,000 to 263,000. The primary reason for that increase are those one-time costs that we mentioned earlier that are due to the rebrand. A part of that will be refinishing the gym floor, building a new website for Crown Point Christian School. That's something that is typically done every 3 years. And then finally, just the signage around the school to update the brand. So those are the primary reasons for the increase in admin and support expenses. All right, you can remember last year we transitioned from to an all-in tuition rate, and you can see last year's budget numbers right there, and the proposed budget numbers to your right. This budget, again, is an all-in tuition budget. We're proposing an increase of 5% in our budgets in tuition costs in order to support the proposed budget. Here are a few references that I used. I referenced in my in the information I just shared with you. These are articles that I've shared with the board and that I used to put this presentation together. One is setting tuition and teacher pay raises for next year. The second one is the dynamism of operations reserves in a Christian school. And then the final article that I took information out of is passing the annual budget, making it easy for the Christian trustee. I invite questions. If you have questions, please feel free to email me. Please feel free to contact me at school. I'd love to have a conversation with you about the process that we use to develop this budget. I'm thankful we have a strategic roadmap and that we were able to fulfill all the items to financially provide for all the items set out in the budget. So please feel free to reach out to me. Finally, at the end of my presentation at the town hall meeting, there was a question about the need to rebrand at Crown Point Christian School. When you have a school that's at capacity, why do we need a brand or need to rebrand? Number one, I guess I'll share with you the same answer I shared that evening. Is number one, Crown Point Christian School's strategic roadmap, a part of the community relations impact area, includes looking at a rebrand. Crown Point Christian has been working with a committee of people for about the past 6 months on a rebrand, and I anticipate at the start of next school year that we will launch that new rebrand. What is a rebrand? A rebrand is basically who Crown Point Christian is and where Crown Point Christian School is going. So part of the work of the rebrand has been reviewing the mission statement of Crown Point Christian School and updating it, but also coming up with common language about who we are and where we're going. And who we are and where we're going is really tied up into our mission statement and who we are and what our ideals are. A part of the rebrand will include an updated corporate logo, as well as an updated athletic logo, and then a supporting color scheme to go along with that. We're excited to roll the brand out to you and feel that it's necessary that we have a cohesive brand as we look to open up the new edition here in the coming months. We're excited to roll out a new brand at the start of next school year. Again, thank you for your time listening to this presentation. There is additional information about the association meeting, including an agenda, a budget summary, a profile of each one of the four, actually, I guess, five board members, nominees that we're asking you to vote for. I really want to encourage you to participate, to make your voice known. If you are a tuition paying parent at Crown Point Christian School, or if you support Crown Point Christian School, you are an association member, and we strongly encourage you to participate in our association meeting on Wednesday, April 19th at 7 a.m. 7 p.m. Thank you.